Just before dawn, when the sky is neither night nor morning and the world feels suspended between two states, something begins to move that no one is yet supposed to notice. On the surface, nothing looks unusual. Airspace is calm, routine signals flow across screens, and crews on duty are doing what they always do at that hour, watching quiet lines and steady numbers that rarely change in dramatic ways. Yet somewhere beyond the horizon, several small objects lift into the air almost at the same moment. Not loudly, not urgently, but with a kind of calm coordination that feels intentional. They do not rush, they do not scatter, they simply begin to travel, each along a slightly different path, as if they already know exactly where they are going and what kind of attention they want to receive. At first, no one thinks this matters. In a world full of constant motion, another movement does not feel special. But sometimes, the most important things begin in a way that feels completely ordinary. As these objects continue forward, they quietly cross lines that are not drawn on any map, but exist very clearly inside complex systems and inside human minds. The moment those invisible boundaries are crossed, a chain of reactions starts somewhere else, far away, in rooms filled with screens, switches, and people trained to notice patterns. What appears is not dramatic at first, just a set of clean, stable signals that look simple, almost polite in their consistency. Nothing erratic. Nothing wild, just a few points moving through space. The kind of thing that usually leads to calm confirmation, routine classification, and the sense that everything is working as intended. And that is exactly what happens. Systems respond the way they were designed to respond. Procedures activate the way they were written to activate. It all feels very safe, very controlled, very logical. There is comfort in that kind of order, especially in environments built around precision and rules. But beneath that calm, something subtle is unfolding. Not a failure, not a breakdown, not a dramatic error, but a quiet alignment of timing, geometry, and expectation. Each step follows the rulebook so well that no one feels the need to question it. That is what makes this moment so interesting. Because nothing here looks like a mistake. Nothing feels like a surprise. Everything appears correct. And yet, somewhere in this perfect sequence, a door is being opened that no one realizes exists. A door not made of metal or concrete, but of assumptions. About how things move, how people react, how systems prioritize, and how decisions are made when time feels short and certainty feels high. From the outside, if you could see it all at once, you might think you are watching a carefully choreographed dance. Some movements are visible and confident, almost inviting attention. Others are quieter, lower, more reserved, content to remain part of the background for now. There is no rush to reveal anything. No need to show the ending when the beginning is already doing its work. This is the kind of story that does not announce itself with noise, but with structure, with patience, with a sense that every small detail has been placed exactly where it needs to be, not to impress, but to guide. And that is why this moment matters. Because what looks like routine is actually the opening of something far more complex. A situation where everything is technically working, everyone is technically doing their job, and yet the outcome is quietly drifting away from what anyone expects. Before anything visible happens, before any clear result appears, the most important change has already taken place. The shape of the situation has shifted. The rules are still there, but they are about to be used in ways they were never meant for. If you stay with this story, if you follow what happens next, you will see how something that begins so gently can reshape an entire morning, an entire base, and an entire way of thinking about control, safety, and certainty. So stay with me, because what happens after this calm beginning is not loud at first, not sudden, not chaotic. It is precise, it is quiet, and it is already in motion. If you want to understand how modern conflicts are no longer decided only by strength, but by timing, perception, and the invisible spaces between rules, make sure you follow along. The next part is where the picture becomes clear. By the time the situation stops feeling routine, it is already too late for it to be simple. What began as clean signals and orderly procedures now unfolds into a sequence of events that no single person fully controls, even though everyone involved is still acting within their authority and training. In the early minutes after detection, the first layer of response moves exactly as expected. Tracking stabilizes, classifications are confirmed, and attention naturally concentrates on the most visible, most cooperative targets, the ones that announce themselves through altitude, signature, and steady movement. These become the center of gravity for the entire defensive picture. Screens brighten around them, calculations refresh every second, and conversations narrow their focus to a small set of numbers that feel important because they are clear. Meanwhile, other movements remain present but secondary, low, quiet, and unremarkable, sitting just below the threshold of urgency in systems designed to prioritize clarity over ambiguity. As engagement begins, the first visible exchange takes place high in the air, far from anything that looks vulnerable. Interceptors rise cleanly into the morning sky, guided by software and doctrine refined over years of testing and drills. From a technical perspective, everything looks correct. The geometry makes sense. The timing falls within acceptable windows, and the confidence indicators on the displays remain comfortably green. Crews trust these signals because they have been taught to trust them, and because they usually deserve that trust. But in this case, the logic is being gently redirected. Instead of creating distance, some of the airborne objects move inward, not away, changing the shape of the engagement in ways that strain the assumptions built into the system. Distances close too quickly, angles shift too sharply, safety boundaries appear where none were expected. In response, automated protections do exactly what they are designed to do. They preserve the integrity of the system, even if that means allowing the targets to pass through untouched. While attention remains locked on this unexpected interaction, other objects continue their movement almost unnoticed. They travel low, steady, and patient, threading themselves through spaces where coverage is thinner and responses are slower. Not because anyone is careless, but because no system can give full intensity everywhere at once. These objects do not rush toward their goal. They wait for timing to mature, for circumstances to align, for the environment to shape itself around them. And when they move into spaces that are constrained not by physics, but by responsibility. Civilian signals, routine transponders, protected corridors, and procedural caution create invisible shields that no one wants to challenge without certainty. This hesitation is not weakness, it is professionalism. It is the human instinct to avoid irreversible consequences when information is incomplete. But it also creates moments of safety for things that know how to use them. As minutes pass, what was once a single engagement becomes several overlapping ones, layered across altitude, distance, and urgency. Some responses arrive too quickly, before systems have stabilized. Others arrive too late, after geometry has already shifted again. Vehicles move, crews adapt, commands flow up and down chains of authority, each adding clarity and delay at the same time. The sky becomes busy, not with chaos, but with activity that is too dense for any one perspective to fully resolve. Tracks merge and separate, signals flicker between categories. Confidence levels rise and fall. Through it all, the objects continue forward, not because no one is trying to stop them, but because every attempt is constrained by rules designed for safety, predictability, and accountability. Eventually, the situation compresses toward a physical place, a specific location on the ground that had seemed distant and abstract only moments before. The atmosphere changes as attention shifts from open sky to fixed infrastructure, from wide areas to narrow perimeters. This is where decisions feel heavier, where consequences feel more tangible, and where hesitation carries emotional weight. Defensive units reposition, not ideally, but urgently. They arrive where they are needed, though not always how they were trained to arrive. Systems come online while still in motion. Crews operate equipment in conditions that are less than perfect, and accuracy competes with speed. Some responses succeed, some partially succeed, some do nothing at all. But none of them fully restore the sense of control that existed before. Then impact happens. Not as a single dramatic moment, but as a sequence of physical changes that cannot be ignored. Fire where there was none before. Smoke where there was only air. Damage where there was once routine order. The environment itself becomes a participant in the event, reflecting light, sound, and heat in ways that draw every remaining eye toward it. What was once an abstract engagement between signals and screens becomes something undeniably real. People on the ground react not to data, but to sensation, to noise, to movement, to urgency that cannot be paused or rewound. The event becomes something that will be remembered not as a process, but as a moment. And yet, even here, nothing feels like a collapse. Systems remain active, crews continue working, commands are still issued and followed. The world does not stop, it simply changes. What disappears is not function, but certainty. The confidence that procedure alone guarantees outcome dissolves quietly. In its place is a more complicated understanding, one where success and failure are no longer clean categories, but overlapping experiences.
Something was stopped. Something was not. Something was protected. Something was not. And the meaning of all of this cannot be reduced to a single sentence or a single metric. What becomes clear is that the event was never about overpowering technology with better technology. It was about shaping the environment in which decisions are made, about creating situations where the safest choice is not always the most effective one, and where the most logical response does not always lead to the desired outcome. It was about turning predictability into a vulnerability, not by breaking the rules, but by following them so closely that their edges became visible. By the time the last movement fades and the sky begins to feel quiet again, the story is no longer about drones or missiles or equipment. It is about trust. Trust in systems, trust in procedures, trust in the idea that if everyone does their job correctly, the result will be acceptable. That trust is not destroyed in this event, but it is reshaped. It becomes more cautious, more reflective, more aware of the spaces between intention and outcome. And in that awareness lies the real significance of what just happened. A significance that extends far beyond one morning, one place, or one set of people. After the immediate activity fades and the air grows quiet again, the meaning of what happened does not arrive as a single realization, but as a slow accumulation of questions. People review recordings, logs, and timelines. Analysts replay radar tracks frame by frame. Commanders listen again to radio traffic, not for what was said, but for what was assumed. The event becomes a layered object, something that can be examined from technical, procedural, psychological, and political angles, each revealing a different lesson. In Moscow, Kiev, Washington, Brussels, and Beijing, the same data is studied through very different lenses, not because the facts differ, but because priorities do. For some, the focus is on equipment performance. For others, it is on decision timing. For others still, it is on how human judgment interacts with automated systems under pressure. In Russia, military engineers and defense planners look first at the technical aspects, asking why specific interceptors behaved the way they did, why certain tracking algorithms lost confidence, and why safety interlocks prevented engagement at crucial moments. These are not signs of poor design, they are the inevitable result of systems built to balance effectiveness with restraint. Every missile system is also a legal system. Every radar is also a political instrument. Every safety boundary is written not only in code, but in policy, reflecting decades of experience with accidents, escalation, and unintended consequences. Those boundaries did not fail, they worked exactly as intended. What changed is that someone understood them well enough to move inside their shape. In Ukraine, the discussion centers less on hardware and more on method. The operation is seen as an example of how careful planning, patience, and a deep understanding of an opponent's doctrine can produce effects that look disproportionate to the tools involved. There is no celebration in this analysis, only focus. The lesson is not that one side is clever and the other is not, but that modern conflict is increasingly about influencing behavior rather than overwhelming it, about guiding responses rather than forcing them. The event is studied not as a victory, but as a case study in how to design operations that interact with systems as social and institutional objects, not just mechanical ones. In the United States and across NATO, the reaction is quieter but more anxious. Western militaries have invested heavily in layered defenses, integrated sensors, and automated decision support, all designed to reduce human error and increase reaction speed. This event challenges some of those assumptions, not by proving them wrong, but by showing their limits. Speed helps, but only within certain geometries. Automation helps, but only within defined scenarios. Integration helps, but only if the information being integrated remains coherent. When the environment becomes intentionally confusing, when targets are not trying to hide but to reshape the decision space itself, even the most advanced systems can be nudged into hesitation. This leads to a broader conversation about the nature of future conflict. The idea of dominance through superior technology begins to feel incomplete, not wrong, but insufficient on its own. What matters just as much is how that technology is embedded in institutions, laws, and cultures. A system that can technically intercept anything is still limited by what it is allowed to intercept, when, and under what certainty. These constraints are not weaknesses to be eliminated, they are safeguards to be respected. But they also become part of the strategic terrain, just like mountains, rivers, and cities. Understanding them becomes as important as understanding physics. Civil aviation authorities, legal experts, and policymakers also enter the discussion, because the boundaries that shape this event are not purely military. They involve civilian airspace, international norms, and risk management practices designed to protect lives and prevent escalation. The overlap between civilian and military domains is not a bug in the system. It is a feature of a connected world, but it also creates complexity that can be used deliberately, not maliciously, but strategically. This forces a difficult question. How do you preserve safety and restraint in a world where those very qualities can be used to create openings? The answer is not simple, and no one pretends it is. Some argue for tightening rules, reducing ambiguity, and granting more authority to automated systems. Others argue for the opposite, emphasizing human judgment, discretion, and adaptability. Most recognize that the future will require a balance that is dynamic rather than fixed, responsive rather than rigid. Training will need to evolve. Simulations will need to include scenarios that feel uncomfortable, not just those that feel controlled. Commanders will need to be comfortable with uncertainty, not just with command. What remains clear is that this event will be referenced for years to come, not as a turning point in a war, but as a turning point in thinking. It illustrates how the character of conflict is shifting from contests of force to contests of perception, timing, and interpretation. From battles over territory to battles over decision space. From destroying systems to influencing how systems behave. And this does not apply only to war. The same logic extends into economics, cybersecurity, information, and diplomacy. Everywhere complex systems exist, there are rules, thresholds, and assumptions that make them function safely. And everywhere those exist, there is the possibility that someone will learn them deeply enough to move within them in unexpected ways. This does not make the world more dangerous by default, but it does make it more subtle. In the end, the most lasting impact of this event may not be measured in damage, cost, or loss, but in conversations. In classrooms, in briefing rooms, in policy meetings, and in quiet moments of reflection where people reconsider what control really means in a world of interconnected systems. The lesson is not that control is an illusion, but that it is always conditional. It depends on context, on assumptions, and on the behavior of others.
The sky that morning eventually returned to looking ordinary. The screens went back to showing familiar patterns. The routines resumed. But beneath that surface, something had shifted. A reminder had been written into experience rather than doctrine, that in complex systems, the most powerful actions are often not those that break the rules, but those that understand them so well they can reshape the game without ever appearing to do so.